Hey everyone and welcome back to our workshop. In this video I will be making a handmade fountain pen with pearl, epoxy resin and pine cones. The shimmer of that blue against the organic pattern of the cones looks incredible. Let's jump right in and see how it all comes together.
At this point, I already have my resin blank prepared. It's made from a mix of epoxy resin and pine cones, which gives a really unique and natural texture inside the material. The blue pearl color of the resin contrasts beautifully with the warm brown tones of the cones. Once it's polished, it will really stand out. I'll start by drilling with a 12mm bit for the cap section. That's the part that will hold the top of the pen. Then I'll switch to a 10.5mm bit for the body, which is the section you hold when writing. It's important to keep the holes perfectly straight so the brass tubes will fit tightly later on. These brass tubes will be glued inside the blank to provide strength, stability, and the perfect connection between the resin and the pen hardware. I always take my time with this step because precise drilling makes everything easier during assembly later. Now it's time to prepare the brass tubes before gluing them into the blanks. I start by sanding each tube lightly with 80 grit sandpaper. This roughens the surface just enough to help the glue bond much better later on. After sanding, I color the tubes with a black permanent marker. I began doing this because I noticed something interesting in previous projects. When the epoxy layer is very thin, the brass color can sometimes show through the resin once everything is polished. It doesn't look very nice, especially when the light hits it, but when the tubes are colored black or in a tone similar to the resin color, the final result looks much cleaner and the metal inside becomes almost invisible. Once all the tubes are colored, I can glue them into the blanks using thick CA glue. I applied the glue along the tube, slowly insert it into the drilled hole and then use activator to make sure it sets quickly and firmly. After everything is glued and the adhesive has cured, I leave the blanks to rest for a few minutes. This gives the glue enough time to fully harden, and then they are ready for the next step, trimming the ends and preparing them for turning. Now that the glue has fully set, it's time to trim the ends of the blanks perfectly flush with the brass tubes. This step is really important because later when we mount the bushings on the mandrel, everything needs to fit precisely and sit at the correct angle. If the ends are not trimmed square to the tube, it can cause alignment problems when fitting the finished parts to the pen kit. To do this, I'm using a special tool, the Axminster woodturning pen trimmer and reamer set. You can find a link to this tool in the description below. It's a very practical tool because it has carbide cutting blades and a set of interchangeable shafts that fit directly into the brass tubes. There are 10 different sizes available, so you can easily find the right one for any pen kit. The trimmer cleans up the resin edges and ensures that the brass tube and the blank are perfectly flat and aligned. This guarantees a clean, tight fit once the pen is assembled later on. I always take my time with this part, because precision here makes the rest of the process much smoother. Now I can mount the blanks on the mandrel. First, I choose the correct bushings for this fountain pen kit. They will define the final dimensions of each part. Then, I slide the blanks onto the mandrel, placing the bushings on both ends to keep everything perfectly aligned. Once everything is in place, I tighten the mandrel and mount it onto the lathe. Now everything is ready for turning. Now it's time to start turning. For this part, I'm using a carbide tool with a round cutter. This type of tool works great for shaping epoxy resin because it allows very smooth and controlled cuts without too much pressure on the material. The round carbide tip is especially useful when you're working with hybrid blanks, like this one part resin, part natural material, in this case pine cones. It helps reduce chipping on the edges and prevents the resin from cracking or tearing out. When turning epoxy resin, it's important to use light passes and keep the tool sharp, because the material can heat up quickly and start to melt or become sticky. I always take my time here and slowly shape the blank down to the bushing size, making sure the surface is even and the transition between the resin and the cones is smooth. You can already see how the blue pearl epoxy starts to shine as it takes shape. It's always exciting to see how these materials reveal their pattern once the surface gets smoother. Since we are already about halfway through the video, what do you think about this combination of epoxy and pine cones? Would you like to see me try a different color next time, maybe a deep red or emerald green? Let me know in the comments what color you'd like to see in the next pen. Stay tuned, because in the next steps I'll start sanding and polishing, and that's when the real magic happens. The resin will become crystal clear and all those details hidden inside will finally come to life. At this stage, I'm filling all the small holes and imperfections inside the pine cones. For that, I use a 2-part CA glue together with activator. This helps to fill every little gap and makes the surface much more stable before finishing. Once the glue is cured, I take the carbide cutter again and carefully remove any excess glue from the surface, leveling everything out. After that, I sand the entire piece up to 400 grit, making sure it's completely smooth and ready for the next step. The surface already feels perfect, and we're getting closer to the most important part of this project. Now that the surface is perfectly smooth, I can apply the final finish. In this case, I'm not going to sand any further. The blank already has a nice even texture after 400 grit. For the finish, I'm applying a thin coat of CA glue, which gives the pen a hard, durable and glossy surface. It also seals the epoxy and the pine cones, protecting them from moisture and giving that beautiful deep shine. Now I start sanding the surface, beginning with 240 grit and working my way up to 400. I'm doing this dry just to remove any remaining tool marks and to get a nice even texture before the final finish. It's important to take it slow and keep the surface clean between grits. That way you get a perfectly smooth base for the next step. After dry sanding, I continue with wet sanding. I start with 600 grit and go all the way up to 5000. Wet sanding helps to keep the surface cool and removes any fine scratches left from the previous steps. It also gives the resin a really nice satin smooth texture before polishing. I make sure to rinse the paper often and take my time with each grit. This part is all about patience and precision. The higher the grit, the clearer and shinier the surface becomes, and you can already see the depth of the blue resin starting to come through. Now I take the polishing compound for epoxy from the company Dane Epoxidars. I apply a small amount to the surface and polish the pen several times until it becomes perfectly glossy. This compound works really well on resin. It removes the finest sanding marks and brings out a deep mirror-like shine. After a few passes, the surface looks completely smooth and the blue resin together with the pine cones really starts to come to life. Now I make a small cut on the ends of each section using a parting tool. This helps me later remove the bushings more easily without damaging the edges of the blanks. It's a very delicate step because the ends of the epoxy can be quite thin and fragile. If you apply too much pressure or cut too deep, it's very easy to chip or even break the edge of the blank. So I take it slowly and carefully, making just a light, clean cut all the way around each end. This way, when the parts come off the mandrel later, the edges will stay sharp and perfectly intact. In my case, the edges still need a little correction, so I'm using the Axminster wood turning pen trimmer and trimmer set again to clean them up. This tool allows me to make sure that both ends of the blanks are perfectly flat and square to the brass tubes. It's a small but very important step. If the edges aren't even, the parts won't fit together properly during assembly. The trimmer removes just a tiny amount of material, enough to ensure that everything lines up perfectly. Once both ends are cleaned up and smooth, the blanks are completely ready for assembly. Now it's time to assemble everything together. I start with the lower part of the fountain pen, the section that you hold while writing. I press the hardware into place carefully, making sure everything fits tightly and perfectly aligned. Then I move on to the cup, which completes the pen. This is always one of my favorite moments, when all the individual parts finally come together and the pen reveals its final form. The combination of the deep blue epoxy resin and the natural pine cones really gives it a unique, elegant character. This handmade fountain pen is now finished and ready to be used. You can find it available on our website PipejaWood.com as well as in our Etsy shop. I'm really curious to hear what you think about this project. Do you like how the epoxy and pine cones turned out together? Would you like to see more fountain pens like this? Or maybe something completely different next time? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I always enjoy reading your feedback and ideas for future projects.
And here it is, the finished fountain pen made from pine cones and blue epoxy resin. If you like this video, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe for more woodturning videos like this. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.